Professor Talagrand, first we want to congratulate you with being awarded the Abel Prize for 2024 for your groundbreaking contributions to probability theory, functional analysis, with outstanding applications to mathematical physics and statistics. You will receive the prize from the Crown Prince of Norway tomorrow. Thank you. You've commented that you've had a career like a Brownian movement, a succession of decisive shocks. And let's start at the beginning. You were born in 1952 and grew up in Lyon. You say that your grandparents came from large poor families in eastern France, but managed to give both your parents good education. But even though your mother was a French teacher, as a child you didn't start out your improbable journey towards probability as a great student. As far as I understand, you were, your spelling was horrible. Would you describe your childhood?
Oh, it was very happy childhood. I grew up in a upper class neighborhood. It was really nice. I didn't have any problem, except I had a little health problem. I lost my right eye at age 5, and this was sort of looming over my whole life. I didn't do sport at school, but I was not really handicapped, and things were happy, essentially. Mm-hmm. Until they were happy until I got 15 and in high school, and then I got retinal detachment in my remaining eyes, and that was a very, very difficult period for me. Medically, I survived because the damage was not great, but the psychological damage was really deep. I really lived in terror of becoming blind for years. And to fight the terror, I had to do something, and the something was study mathematics, because my father was a math professor, and naturally he attracted me there. And why mathematics? Because all the rest I was very mediocre. So it was an obvious choice.
But you did have an budding interest in that direction already, or?
Oh, not, okay, I was interested in science from an early age. And again, thanks to my father, who subscribed a scientific magazine. And science was very much in the air. That was the year of the Sputnik. The times were changing. Nobody believed that the Sputnik would come anytime soon, and then it came. And we believed in unlimited progress. That was very naive, but that's what we believed in. And so science was the natural place where things were happening.
So then you had this traumatic experience, and your father helped you through it.
My father greatly helped me. He, when I was in hospital, he went to see me every day, and he talked mathematics for that, to keep me busy and to give me a goal. And it had a great effect. You see, somehow I could say that I'm sort of lucky, because I had this trouble which gave me some psychological impetus in a very positive direction. That on the other hand, my eye damage was not so bad. I could function properly. With some limitation, I could function, and it was not an impairment in my life. While on the psychological side, it was a great positive. So overall, I benefited from that. I probably would not have become a mathematician if I didn't have health problem. I'm sure.
But part of that time you were a bandit.
Okay, well, they were retinal detachment. The medicine has made a lot of progress, and at the time I had to stay in bed for over months, with the eye bandaged, and my father, that's why he came every day and talked to me and he explained to me integration by parts, and I remember that. And I felt so good, I could understand something.
But then you were admitted to high school, and you say you had very competent high school teacher, and you.
Okay, I was in the best high school in Lyon, where my father was himself a professor, And the last 2 years, they were remarkable people being a high school teacher. The French system has a very demanding certification method for people who are teachers in the last 2 years of high school. And they get fantastically good result. My math teacher in the last 2 years were both very great. The physics teacher was great, and the natural science teacher was great. It's really amazing how good these people were.
So these things played together.
Of course, it's made because, I can tell you, a funny story. I was complaining to in the last year of high school, I was complaining to the teacher that the exams were too easy. So she put bonus questions. She added extra problems just to keep me happy, essentially. And of course, they were bonus questions, and I was happy, and she encouraged me, and I felt good.
And you entered the French Olympiad, and then physics and mathematics.
The French system is, I think, is greatly efficient system, but I could not really take advantage of it because my parents felt it was too demanding. Mm-hmm. So I went to university instead, which is not the royal way in the French education. The royal way, they have special school, they call normal, and which I didn't follow this law. I went to University of Lyon, and University of Lyon, I was saved again by the high level of the lectures. Even I would say too high because it was too difficult for most of the students. Mm. But it saved me because I could learn things doing the proper way. And that's where, in particular, I got the course of measure theory, and I fell in love with measure theory. Mm. That was my first mathematical love, and it greatly influenced me in the rest of my life.
So where did you think your studies would lead you? I know you studied for the agrégation, or did you have an idea where you wanted to go?
No, I have no idea. I had no idea what to do. Of course, I had to make a living, and I knew I had to make a living with the government because if in case I become blind, they will find some spot for me in any case. So, and then the obvious way was to get the agrégation. For which I prepared. I spent a lot of energy on that. And because, I'm a dutiful person, when I start doing something, either I don't do it or I do it right. So I trained myself, I solved the problems.
And you did exceptionally well.
I did I'm still proud that the grade was 318 out of 320. But it's artificial grade, of course. I didn't do the whole problem. It's just by comparison with other.
But then you got a position at CNRS.
No, that's it. Absolutely. Okay, I benefited from a number of miracles, and which were also in a short window of time. There was a very short window of time in France where France had this position in CNRS since 1936, something.
Perhaps you should explain what CNRS is.
CNRS is a research, it's a research institute. When you get hired for CNRS, you have a position as a researcher for many years, and most of the time for your entire life. And essentially, you have no other duty than doing research. And I'm very grateful for the French government to have given me one of these positions, because I could do exactly, there was no administrative duties, no teaching duties. You can devote yourself entirely to research, and then you have no control whatsoever. You study whatever you want. It's absolutely total freedom. And I immensely benefited from that.
Yeah. And which role did Kaham play?
So I can explain to you the story is there is a number of positions every year, and my great luck was in the year I applied, in 1974, there was an exceptionally large number of positions that year. Mm. And if I had applied 2 years later, I would not have got the position. And there were sufficiently many positions that they were considering people who had not done any research yet, which was my case. Mm. The only thing I had for me is that my professors at university were aware that they didn't get very often students like me, so they jointly wrote a recommendation letter. Four of them
was one of them.
Four of them wrote a letter, and it reached the committee. And then the hiring committee had Jean-Pierre Kahn, who is a famous French mathematician, and Jean-Pierre Kahn is a very dutiful person. So he wrote to me to explain, personally he wrote to me, he said, please explain the situation, why you were in university, not in the normal system, and so that otherwise you won't have a chance. So I described my health problem and why I went to university and that I loved mathematics, I wanted to do it, and I got hired. And so I sang to Jean-Pierre Kahn many years later, and he made this very beautiful answer. He told me, I just read your letter to the committee. I didn't do anything. That's what he said, and I greatly admired him for saying that.
Mm. And then when you have your CNRS position, then you start on your PhD studies.
That was before the PhD, right? So exactly. I started my PhD with having the research position. Now, I knew, my instinct told me that I shouldn't stay in Lyon. It was not the right place. So I inquired where I should go, and I was sent to the group of Professor Choquet, who was a very active group at that time, and it ended up by being a good place to be for me. Of course, it's very difficult. I arrived there, I didn't know any mathematics. I was not able to make any choice by myself, so I tried to follow the seminar, of which I didn't understand a word, of course, for a long time. And of course, as you begin, you cannot read paper because they refer to other papers you don't know. It's so difficult to get started. And and then I went to see Professor Choquet, and I said, please, I need to survive. Ask me some problems that I can focus on something. And he asked me some problems, and one of them I could solve pretty easily. And he had tried a few days, so he gave me credit when I solved this problem. I didn't have to line up for 1 hour to go to talk to him in his office.
That's here.
That was a great privilege.
And you got your PhD.
And I got my PhD in 1970 for 3 years, which was well solved.
But I like this comment that Professor Choquet did to you when you had your defense. He said that you were a problem-solving machine.
That's what he told my father, yes.
Father. And so this, at least, and you also said yourself you thought it is fun to solve problems.
But you see, this is, the most difficult problem when you do research is, on which topic do you do research? How do you choose the problem on which you work? First, it has to be the right area. And then it has to be the right level of difficulty. That's the most delicate part. If it's too easy, it's an exercise. It doesn't bring anything. If it's too hard, you get discouraged and you don't have a chance. So and I was not in position to choose the problem by myself because I don't have any overview of mathematics, especially when you start. How do you do that? So I ask other people what problems do they have, and it was a various success. Some problems, they sound okay, I remember one, they take a Banach space and you have the weak topology and the norm topology. Do they have the same Borel sets? Okay, it's reasonable to ask this question. Now, of course, as you expect, if you take a really large Banach space, the answer will be no, but it requires some effort to do that.
Yes.
Okay, but then you have a paper, but it doesn't go anywhere. So many papers I wrote were like that. It doesn't go anywhere. But the thing is, I explored many areas. And then out of the number, then finally I hit some directions which were much more fruitful. And when I became interested in probability because some measure theory brought me to probability. It's really the first effort I did towards probability where really was thinking about vector-valued functions and what are the right notions of that. And it brought me to the Gliven-Cook-Cantelli problem, which is when is the law of large number uniformly valid on a family of function, and that brought me to more central question of probability. And then there was the very important event for me that Gilles Pizier joined our group.
So at least this indicates what you're telling us, that you are more of a problem solver than a theory builder.
I am not a theory builder. I don't have an overview of things. I attack concrete little problems, and if it works, I try to push them. But I would say the main thing is I try to get a full understanding. I cannot stop until I feel I completely understand the problems. And that has turned out to be a fruitful way to...
Yeah. And before we leave Skau Choquet, he gave you an advice how you should attack a problem. Could you explain that?
Now, one of the first things I asked Professor Choquet is, please advise me on how to do research. And he gave me the most useful advice I ever got, which I call the Choquet principle, which of course it was well known before him, but I received it from him. When you attack a problem, always choose the proper setting for the problem. And the proper setting is that should have no extraneous structure. It should be the minimum structure where the problem makes sense. And the obvious reason for that is you don't get distracted by things which are not relevant for the problem. And I have applied exactly that several times with infinite success, I would say.
But you go even further than that. I have the impression that when you attack a problem, you exhaust the problem. You really tear it apart. You work at it.
I cannot understand things halfway. It's very slow. I try to understand things in depth, but that's a very slow process. I try to learn mathematics. I try to read the fellow's book in probability. And then I read the book and I put on the shelf, and 1 month later, I don't remember a word because I didn't go deep enough in that. I didn't chew it long enough. So having to chew these things forever and ever and ever, of course, is a time problem. So I cannot learn and the others have an overview, and I have to ask people, please tell me what is it.
But it's so, when you gather all this experience from doing all these calculations, you must yourself have you must gain some overview of the subject.
The overview, you have to, of course, to get familiar with an object, you have to play with it. Now, when the object is too complicated, you play with you make a simplified version, which you believe has some of the characteristic of what really interests you. And if it's not enough, you iterate. And you end up if you are lucky, or if you look in the right direction, you end up by making some simple computation which actually reflect some part of the general phenomenon. And if you can do that, it orients you. Of course, I spend a lot of time doing that with trying to look for direction and understanding the basic mechanism.
And at this stage, we are now moving from measure theory or Choquet theory to probability. And you go to Vancouver in 1978, as far as I remember.
Okay, the invitation of it was a good luck. Canadians have a large research grant to invite people, and and I had done some work on a topic called invariant means, which was a sort of failed attempt because I didn't go very far, but I got invited for 3 months in Vancouver, and I had a great time there. And the greatest time is when I came back from Vancouver, I decided to stop in the place where I knew people.
And this school in Ohio?
And then among these places was Kent, Ohio, where I had the most important event of my life. My future wife. And that was an extraordinary piece of luck, who was waiting there to support my mathematics.
But Wanzhou was a student.
She was a student. And there were several people in a jury, including one who is called Joe Distel, was a very respected person in Banach space, who was the person who had invited me. And when I was in the office of Joe Distel discussing mathematics, she came in to brought a copy of her thesis. And I looked at her, and basically that was it.
Okay, but you met Wanso as a student in Ohio.
She was a student in Ohio.
With Diestel?
And no, she was a student in probability, which I didn't know anything of at the time. But it happened that in her jury, there was Joe Distel, who was a very respected person in Banach Space, and the one who had invited me because I had done some little things in Banach Space. And apparently he said good words about me to Wanso. So I had she got somewhat interested because her father was a very prominent scholar in Korea, and he taught his children that the only real value in life is scholarly knowledge. And when for a mathematician, find a wife who has been taught that as a child, this is absolute miracle, because, of course, she always totally respected my work, and I wouldn't be here without her constant support.
Okay, so you had a project you needed to woo Wanso, and
that took some time, and that was the most difficult theorem, I think.
And you have this horrible year of 81 that's both horrible and good at the same time. Could you just take us through India and at the happy ending?
Yes. Now it is when you live in a terror for a long time, and I lived really, terror is the right word, I live in the terror to become blind. At some point, I felt, that was too much, and I should free myself from that. And I did something which, in retrospect, is absolutely stupid. I stopped seeing an ophthalmologist because nothing had happened for a time. And in 1981, I took a trip to India. So see, I can function even though I am a little bit handicapped visually. I could travel by myself. And my great luck in India is in a train station, somebody took a razor blade and cut my bag from the bag and got all my camera lenses and my sunglasses. And I cannot function without sunglasses, so I went to see my ophthalmologist. Please give me a prescription for sunglasses. And my ophthalmologist looked at my right eye, he said, wait, what is your problem? So I explained, and he said, no, but you are crazy. You must check up your retina. So I made an appointment to check up my retina, and my retina was verge on detaching. And if I had not seen her, I would have become blind within a few months, and that would have been it. So I was really saved by these very specific circumstances. And really, this ophthalmologist was really a great person because she gave me emergency laser surgery. And she gave me emergency laser surgery the day the whole hospital was on strike. Oh, wow. But she has to save me
in France.
And to save in France, in Paris. And she has to save me, so strike or no strike, this goes first.
Oh, wow.
You see, there are people like that, and I'm very grateful that I met one like that. And then it's just after that finally I got a phone call telling me that I would marry Wanso. So that was bold.
And she was then at the time in Ohio.
She was at the time in Ohio, and she called me from Ohio.
And you were married the same
year.
And
we were married as fast.
So getting back to the mathematics, could you tell us the transition, your love for measure theory, and how did you get into probability theory?
Okay. As I said, there was this intermediate step, which was the Gliven-Cook-Cantelli problem, which is the classes of function on which the uniform law of large number the law of large number holds uniformly.
Yeah.
And
that type of mathematics.
This is a half measure theory because you don't really have any complicated concept of probability, just a law of large number. It's so simple. And then it's largely part of measure theory because you have to work with the combinatorics of the classes of function, No Brownian motion, no stochastic integral law. This is very basic. And then what happened in the time, there was this field called probability in Banach space, which was already developed for some time. So what people were trying to do in probability in Banach space was, instead of looking probability in 2 or 3 dimensional space, they look in higher dimensional space. And the field, they tried to copy what was done in small dimension. And it came exactly at the right time because that's a time where high dimensionality starts to be important in mathematics. And it had not been explored before. So there was this entire field that I won't say was waiting for me, but had not been explored enough and enough in depth. And I arrived just at the right moment where this was gaining importance and was still many things to discover. So the transition was through probability and Banach space, and then Gilles Pizier asked me about the suprema of Gaussian process, which was a rather well-known problem in that area.
Yeah.
And it was easy to, having gone through probability in Banach space, it was very easy to connect to that and feel that was important. And also, the world of mathematics has changed. Probability was not considered as mathematics when I was a student. Yeah. In Lyon, there was no graduate course in probability. I didn't take any course in probability ever, which somehow is very positive because I was not formed in their own way. I could have a different approach.
Yes,
and this is very easy to understand, that your problem that you're now studying boundedness of stochastic processes. That is very important. You mentioned in your book on it, your cellar being filled with water. What is the likelihood of that happening?
We have all around us now. We have models. We use everywhere models of stochastic process. Now, the illustration I give is because I had a beautiful house just beside the river, and I didn't know when I bought the house that the river sometimes get up and get into the house. So the level of the river, which is, you model that as a stochastic process because it depends on so many elements, that the best way to understand it is to think it at random. So if you want to know the maximum of the process, means whether the river will visit you or not, this is a very important criteria. And it applies in so many situations. So if you study, of course, the stock market, people do that.
Yeah. So this result, has something to do with a lot of cancellations going on between the minor processes, and so that the larger result is
this.
Could you explain that?
Okay, this is further, what you mentioned is really further along the story of boundedness of Gaussian process. Yes. So the boundedness of Gaussian process, I gave a complete understanding of that in some sense. In some sense, it's I related two quantities, one of probabilistic nature, which is the supremum of a Gaussian process, and then the other one is a geometric nature, which is the nature of the index set as a metric space. So something we work entirely about metric space. And here I should make an interesting comment, is this metric space is not any metric space. It's a very special metric space because it's a subspace of Hilbert space. But if you try to use that it's a subset of Hilbert space, you are dead. The successful construction is to forget completely and think of that as an abstract metric space and making general argument true in any metric space. And that's the key to the success. Go to forget about what is probably irrelevant. Try first to forget about it. Of course, if it doesn't work, you can always come back to it. But first, forget about it. And it was beautifully and successful in that.
I'm sorry. And so, here you're following Xavier Fernic's original setup.
Sorry?
Xavier Fernic's setup.
Yes. Now, Fernic, the way people were studying, mathematicians, they sort of mimic what has been done. So there was a method called the entropy numbers, to standard method, and it will not give the right result for Gaussian processor. The person who really made the breakthrough is Xavier Fernic. Xavier Fernic found a better way to bound Gaussian process. It was very messy and very difficult to understand, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that he made the breakthrough, and his bound had a chance to be the correct one. Well, the other bound had no chance. They were so very simple example. And what I proved is that Fernic's bound was actually of the correct order. So it could be, one would say, it could be reversed. So within a universal constant, it gives you the right order of the maximum of the Gaussian process. And that was done by, really the key step was abstract construction in metric space, which which after you succeed in doing it, you really wonder why you didn't do it before, like so often.
But at that time, that was probably your greatest result at the time, when you proved that bound on the Gaussian processes. Was that your best result at that time?
At that time, it was the best result. It was the best known problem that I had solved at that time. People in probability were well aware of that problem, which you could argue goes back to Kolmogorov.
Could you explain this chaining process, this generic chaining?
Okay, so this is another story. The way initially I solved that was through this Fernic concept of majorizing measure.
Yes.
And it took me a very long time to understand that these complicated things that Fernic was doing, in fact, could be done in a very simple way, with a slight change of perspective. You see, this is the beauty of mathematics. You have something very complicated and you make a slight change of perspective and it becomes very simple. And the slight change of perspective took 50 years. And after you found it, you say, boy, why didn't I do that in 10 minutes? But that's not the way it works. You will never do it in 10 minutes. And so this generic chaining is really, it's a method to bound stochastic process. Really, the way Kolmogorov was doing that by having successive approximation, which getting more and more complex, and studying when you go from one approximation to the next one, really keeping track very closely of what happens. And so when I solved this, the problem for Gaussian processes, of course, I was young and full of hope. So I say, this result about Gaussian process tells you really, though, if you want to say the philosophy, it says that the universe is as simple as it can be concerning Gaussian process, in the sense that you can have a complete understanding of the thing just by looking at the structure of a certain metric space. It's an absolute miracle. And so I said, why not? Why would there be more miracle than that? So I made a series of conjectures about all kinds of processes, which would essentially say, all these conjectures, that basically, if you do the chaining the most clever way, maybe if God tells you what's a good chaining to do, you will really extract all what happens in the problem. I made this conjecture before 1990, and incredibly, they are all solved now in a positive way. So concerning stochastic processes, for this, my point of view, and not all stochastic processes, universe is as nice and as simple as it could be.
I mean,
this is fabulous.
Yes.
And of course, I was lucky that it's that way. Otherwise, I would have worked for nothing.
Yeah. Could we move to what is called concentration or measure principle?
The magical period.
Yeah, magical period in your life. I mean, but let's take the classical two-dimensional or isoperimetric inequality, which states that L square is larger or equal to 4 pi a, where L is a string of length L, and then you have the area that it encloses in the plane. And you have equality if and only if, of course, you have a circle. How is this isoperimetric problem related to what became...
Okay, I will try to explain that. Now, this one you mentioned was known to the ancient Greek, so it took some time. This one is on the plane now. What I'm doing is in high dimensions, so I have to move to, say, Euclidean space on n dimension. So let me state a simple problem here, very much related. You take a body of a given volume in nth dimensional space, and you look at the set of points which are within a given distance, say t, of that set. Now, how small can be the volume of that set? Mm-hmm. And the answer is, well, there is an extremal situation, which is when your original body is a sphere, then the set, you can compute everything. The set within distance is another sphere, and that's the extremal case. But in that setting, you don't see yet concentration of measure. To see concentration of measure, you have to move to the sphere. So you take the sphere in the Euclidean sphere in n-dimensional space. It's something we don't really visualize. And then actually Paul Lévy understood it all on the sphere. So on the sphere you take...
That was at the beginning of last century, wasn't it?
Beginning 1917, that's exactly. Paul Lévy's inequality. And which, incidentally, this is remarkable. It's how long it took. It started by a probabilist and how long it took to go back to probability, when actually the essential phenomenon is already in Lévy's inequality. So let me give a sample. You take on the sphere, you take a set of measure 1/2. It contains half of the point of the sphere. Now you look at the set of points within distance t on that. And what happens is the set of points, it's almost all the sphere. The points which are not within distance t, their measure is at most e to the minus t squared over 2. So it decreases exponentially fast. And that's independent of the dimension of the sphere. That's what is important here. So consequence of that, if you have a well-behaved function on the sphere, say Lipschitz function, then it has a great tendency to be nearly constant. Now, nearly constant means that its fluctuation will be the same however large the sphere is. That's a kind of very deep generalization of the law of large number. Yeah. So that things were clear to essentially, I learned the idea from Vitaly Milman, and there was Vitaly Milman and Michael Gromov worked on that, and they developed the phenomenon of concentration of measure, and which are sort of generalization of that, what happens for the sphere.
Did Lévy see that?
Lévy, no, I don't. Lévy didn't see that. Lévy died in 71, and Lévy didn't see that.
Terence Tao states that the Talagrand inequality...
We're not there yet.
Sorry?
We're not there yet.
Oh, we're not there yet.
No, we're not there yet. I'm explaining concentration of measure in a general way.
Let's continue.
Okay, so it becomes clear. Now, you see the sphere, that's geometry. Geometry is not my field. My field is product spaces, independent random variables, so product of different measure space. That's what I was thinking about. From measure theory, that was my training to look at product spaces. So it was known that you have the same phenomenon of concentration of measure in the product space. If you take half of the points, then essentially every point is, if you take a set large enough that it has half of the point, essentially every point is close to it. But it was close to it, they had some measures and it was known, and there are results of that, but I was motivated by some actually rather special problems of probability in Banach space. I wondered whether you could have some other notion of closedness which would have the same phenomenon. And my great luck was that there was, and nobody had looked at them, that with the proper point of view, it was not that difficult to discover that. And so you have this general statement, if in a product space I take a set large enough that it contains half of the point, then in various sense of closeness, most of the points are close to that set. But so that has great many applications to probability, because there are so many probabilistic objects which are built on independent random variables. And the remarkable things about that is you could argue that this comes from isoperimetric ideas, but then the isoperimetry has disappeared. There is nothing in it like a boundary of a set, and you remain only the concentration of measure, which is a consequence of isoperimetry, remains. And it's not a very precise version to know what are the extremal set in the sense that the worst possible. This is not known, and it's okay. It would be fine, but it's an interesting problem. But it would not have many consequences to know that. Important consequence are the concentration of measure. And then again, I explain my gratitude to Vitaly Milman, because he's the one who convinced me that was the important idea. And I must admit that first time or second time I saw him talking of that, I thought, this guy is obsessed. What's the point of all that? No, he's a kind of person who has a vision. He had a vision. Now, having the vision and being to prove technically the thing is not, there is some distance.
Yes.
That the vision you cannot do without the vision, and he's the one who brought it to me.
And this, of course, became what is called the convexified.
Now, the convexified is one of these inequalities where you, to measure the distance of a point to a set, you at some point you take a convex hull. Okay. What you do exactly, you try to look at, you have your given point, you try to find a point in the set, and you look how many coordinates you must miss. And so when you vary your point in your set, you will miss different sets of coordinates. And then at that level here, you take a convex hull. And things greatly simplify, and there is a kind of miracle which happens, and which is really that's kind of abstract version of the law of large number, and which has a great many consequences. When you study combinatorial optimization, we will take some random data and try to make a construction. Say you take n random points in the unit square, and you look at the shortest path through them.
Yes.
Now, say that's a random variable. What are the fluctuations of these random variables? Okay, now this convexified inequality gives you bounds which are the correct order.
And the convex idea came from Choquet.
No, actually, when I asked Choquet, this is unbelievable. When I asked Choquet his advice, so he explained me Choquet principle. Then he had a wink, he said, it's often useful to take a convex hull, which is what I did. And then he said, it also helps very much to consider product. Now, I spend my life working with product measures. So, okay, I don't know if you believe in coincidences, but the three things I heard from Choquet, they are the three ones which I was the most successful.
You have to tell about the taxi driver.
Okay, the taxi driver, so the convexified inequality, I used to have a small company to take me from my place to the airport, and one Sunday, I go to the airport with them, and when I give my credit card to the taxi driver, he looks at my name and he says, "Oh, you was a mathematician." Now, of course, the explanation of that it was Sunday, so he was the boss of the company, and he had learned about this inequality in business school. So it was considered simple enough to, at a high-level probability course in business school, they could show this inequality. Which, being recognized by a taxi driver, how can you?
Do you consider this result as your best result?
It's surely the most popular and the one most people will learn, and probably the one which will be used the longest, because on examples, you can see that it captures really at a deep level, it captures nearly something nearly optimal in many circumstances. So I'm glad I proved this result. Yes.
Let's move to one of the big results that you have proved, and let me read the following. How and when did you became acquainted with the spin class phenomenon in physics, and in particular the so-called Parisi formula? Could you tell about how you got into that?
In a conference, I met Erwin Bolthausen, who is a well-respected probabilist who was interested in applied things, and he wrote the Hamiltonian of the Sherrington-Kirkpatrick model, and then the interaction between any two given atoms is given by a Gaussian random variable. So you have a bunch of independent Gaussian random variables, and I foolishly thought that I understood this better than anybody else, so that I would be able to make progress on that model. And by the time I understood this was absolutely stupid illusion, of course, I was already hooked by the problem. And this problem was a big challenge in the sense that this is a perfectly well-defined mathematical object, and the physicists are studying it by method which, I won't qualify, But there are kind of things, consider n copy of the system, and you may compute a quantity for depending on n, and then you take n a negative number, and then you draw some conclusion from that formula.
That's what you call witchcraft.
That's what I call witchcraft. And but actually, it would be this is not a coincidence. This cannot be a coincidence. There must be some, it's like the sum of the 1 over n is minus 112. Mm-hmm. This kind of formula. It must, at some level, there must be something which remains to be understood for the future generation. But there was this challenge to have this mathematical theory being studied by physics method. And the challenge was well known. And I got this problem at a period of my life where I was stuck on stochastic process. I was stuck on everything I wanted to do. So I said, why not? There is nothing to lose by trying.
And this is 95.
This is about 95.
When you've had your success.
Yes, when I get stuck with, because I couldn't solve what I call the Bernoulli conjecture, which was solved by Latala and Bednorz later.
2011 as far as...
2011, yeah. Yes. And so I took it the very humble way.
As you always do.
I always, you have to start from the beginning. If you don't understand the simple things, you won't solve the difficult ones. It sounds so obvious. So I say, okay, what's the minimum challenge? Prove anything at all on any model at all. That's low enough. Okay, let us try. And then I explore the number of models, starting from bottom. And there was basically no mathematics had been done on that. And I worked very hard for a very long time, and without any hope of success, but okay. And I was lucky. At some point, I made actually this, 6, 7, 8 years of very hard work. You could summarize it in a 3-line observation made at some point, which looked completely trivial, that you had to find the lower bound for a certain quantity, and the observation was that, if you are clever and you take two similar quantity that you couple in a certain way, if you can find an upper bound on that, it will give you the lower bound you look for. And that completely changed the problem, because there are method to find upper bound that Francisco Guerra had developed, and this method could be applied with small variation. There, the solution of the Paris solution came out. But you had to make this crucial little observation, which I made by, exploring and exploring and exploring, without any hope, in fact.
And you probably wouldn't have recognized that it was a good idea had you exhausted it.
No, okay. I wrote a number of long papers that Erwin Bolthausen was very supportive. He published in probability theory and related field. Even, they have 4 issues every year. I had the great honor that one of the issues are 2 long papers of mine on spin glasses. How can he be more supportive than that? It's very important to be supportive, because I could keep doing it. Yeah. It encouraged me to continue, even though the success I had at that point was marginal.
Yeah.
Okay.
But is it correct to say that you didn't invent new mathematics to solve?
No, I didn't. You see, the physicist, the mathematician couldn't solve that. And why they couldn't solve it? Many good people tried. They were not humble enough. They think they're good, they're going to come and solve that in 2 weeks. No, that's not the case. They are not humble. They should have started from the beginning. So the physicists thought there are new mathematics needed. But now I understand why, because it's about quantum field theory. Now, quantum field theory is something that the mathematicians have not been able to fix. And it's clear that new mathematics are needed for that. And the physicists thought they had a second setting where they would also need new mathematics. But no, the old mathematics worked very well for that.
Yes.
So, but the point is, I'm very happy I did that. But I wouldn't say this is an important result. It is nice to have removed that thorn in the foot of mathematician, that they couldn't duplicate the physicist work. Yeah. But what would be important to understand the universe are not the mean field model. They are the real model of spin glasses, like the Edward Anderson model. And this, nobody knows to do anything about them, including the physicists don't agree on what the solution is. Yeah. So when the physicists don't agree,
right. And of course, proving this Parisi formula sort of was an ingredient in getting the Shaw Prize, and also, of course, Parisi getting the Nobel Prize
because
in 21.
Okay, Parisi was such a nice person, when he gave a lecture in Institut Henri Poincaré soon after, and he said, now we are sure that the solution is correct. Of course, every physicist was absolutely convinced that they had the right solution, that he was gentleman enough to say that. And it was so nice to hear him saying that.
Would you? Yeah, and then in 2005, you had enough of Sheridan Kirkpatrick, and you need to do something else, and you moved towards control measure problem.
There is actually, it's a fruitful stage in your life when you have nothing more to lose and only to gain, because you can make bets like the bet I made for the spin glasses, which miraculously worked out. So, of course, I was pumped up. So I say, okay, why don't I go back to one of the problems of my youth, which was called the control measure problem, which you can argue goes back to von Neumann, or at least to Dorothy Maharam, who had some work, Maharam algebra. It's called Maharam problems, and on measure algebra. So this problem was 58 years old, and many people had considered it. And I tried in my youth, and I miserably failed. But then I say, okay, why not come?
But actually, so you have this nice thing about your 1980 paper.
Yes, I mean,
which is sort of
I had some attempt, and I discussed that with David Price at one winter school. So he had some nice construction, and then I forgot about this conversation. And a couple of years later, I thought again about it, and I said, wait, what? I discovered something, and I wrote a paper, and that was David Price's idea. But somehow, a few years after having written that paper, it came back to me, Didn't I hear that from David Price? So I asked David Price, and he said, yes, of course. But he had never mentioned it because he knows exactly what the process is. He knows that I'm not going to steal anything from him. But honestly, I think I discovered it when it just...
Exactly. But you got a counterexample, right, to this?
No, but okay, the paper that I stole from David Price was this tiny little...
Oh, that's different.
In 2005, what happened is that there had been two very good ideas in the meantime, what I not thought about the problem. One was by Roberts with... Now, so interesting how people are different. Jim Roberts, he has one person has two very deep ideas. He doesn't have a huge number of contributions to mathematics, but certain ideas very deep. He constructed a convex set without extreme points. So this is some of a very old problem he solved. And then he made a very good contribution toward the control measure problem. And then there was another contribution, and I studied both of them at the same time. And then within weeks, I saw that this is obvious. You just put things together and the problem is solved. It was...
So that was a counterexample.
Then it gave a counterexample to Maharam's problem. So which means that there exist measure algebra which are complicated and do things which you wouldn't expect. Okay. And maybe one day they will be used for something, but in the meantime... It's not likely,
But then you also went back to this Fourier series.
Yeah, now Fourier, the thing of Fourier series, this is, these are my obsessions. Mm-hmm. These are my obsessions. Fourier series, I started being interested. When I wrote my book with Michel Talagrand, we had to mention the random Fourier series because it's obvious application to probability in high dimension. So I had to study random Fourier series, and, everything in that book, I have digested it completely over again. I never copy anything from anybody else. I all digest it again. So there were these great advances. It's a traditional topic. There were great advances made by Marcus and Pizier, and I read their paper, and I found alternate proof, from my point of view, somewhat simpler, but okay. But then I feel I didn't fully understand the topic, so I kept thinking about it forever, even though nobody was interested. And it was a good idea because when you try to study general stochastic processes, there are different difficulties which merge together or at the same time. There are difficulties coming that from your random variable are complicated. And there are difficulties coming from the fact that somehow your index space is not homogeneous. It's not the same happens everywhere. Gaussian process, if you look at Gaussian process on an ellipsoid, the edge of the ellipsoid is not the same at the center. You have to take an account of that. Random Fourier series, one of the difficulties disappears because there is some homogeneity over the whole space, over the whole group on which they take. So you get half of the difficulty away, so you can concentrate on the other half. And it was important because several of the ideas which were very fruitful later on to study general stochastic process, I discovered by studying random Fourier series. So it was a great instrument of discovery, even though I didn't have much to show about random Fourier series. But I kept the result of Marcus and Pizier. They had some condition which I tried to remove. I tried to understand in full generality. But that's to make myself happy. I know nobody will ever care about that. And the nice reward I got is at the very end, then I made a conjecture which I had never made enough, which essentially said that there are two random Fourier series can be uniformly converging. There are two simple situations, almost trivial, where it is true, but the general situation is a mixture of the two. So nature is as simple as it can be. These objects look complicated, but because you don't know how to look at them, if you know how to look at them, they are a mixture. They are a mixture of two very simple cases, which converge for entirely different reasons. That's the thing.
That must be a very exciting time.
That's what I did. I was almost 70, and I had a brain hemorrhage before, 6 months before.
And now we're at the stage where you actually are revisiting many of your ideas and actually are improving on them. You rewrote one of your books.
I rewrote. It is difficult, How do you have a constructive end of your career when you're a mathematician? Now, my own belief in that it is very dangerous to keep working on the same topics because the odds are not that you will make great progress. So I applied that philosophy in which I believed, and I stopped doing research when I was something like 58. And I tried to have fun, and have fun was learning physics, which I couldn't learn at college. And I run into quantum field theory, and the rest was easy. It's not easy. General relativity, you cannot say it's easy, but it's a purely mathematical theory. So if you're a mathematician and work at it, you will understand it very well. Now, quantum field theory is not mathematical, and there is no place where it can be learned easily. The work done by physicists, it's a different world, different universe, different way to think, different language, and not the same idea of what an argument is. And the work of mathematician was impossible to understand. So I spent a lot. I never worked. I worked as much on that topic as I worked on spin glasses. And of course, I didn't contribute anything, but I explained a little bit of the theory to myself and hopefully to other people. And I spent 10 years doing that. And actually, I'm revising this book now, which is almost certainly my last piece of work. I'm revising this book. And when I finished the book, it occurred to me that I had never worked as hard to explain things like I did in this book. What would happen if I took my book on stochastic process and I made a real effort to explain it? And this question. And fortunately, I tried to do that. And it was sort of a horrific experience because I opened my book and I could improve it immediately.
And we will get back to the books because you've written, because that's a very impressive topic. But I want to digress a little, Laura. This about understanding Bernoulli processes. where you offered $5,000.
Now, the Bernoulli when...
Could you tell about that?
I can tell you about that. You see, after doing the Gaussian process, characterization of Gaussian process, you think, what's the next most important process which you should try to understand? And so what's the most basic random variable? Is coin flipping random variable. So random variable takes value 1 or -1 equal probability. How? It cannot be simpler than that. Now you take linear combination of these. Okay? Now then you get, each time you take a linear combination of this, you get a random variable. Now you have your linear combination value. You get a process.
Yep.
And then you have to understand the supremum of this process. So based on purely philosophical ground, this is the simplest possible situation. Therefore, it must be fundamental. That's really the thing. Then I saw this is a fundamental problem, and I worked very hard on that, and I couldn't solve it. And to make it known that I considered it was important, I offered $5,000 for the solution. And this is another happy story. It was solved by two Polish people, Rafał Latala, who is a great mathematician, and Witold Bednarz. And Latala started on this problem essentially when he was a student. He thought something like 20 years about it before he solved it. And if there ever was $500, which were well deserved, that was for the solution of this problem. And I was so happy to pay them out, and they went hiking with that. But what is interesting in that, in the philosophical belief that this was very simple, therefore fundamental, was absolutely true. Because I mentioned that all the 1990 conjecture were solved. They were solved. It's building on that result, building on the understanding of Bernoulli process. Then from that, you can study other class of processes and solve all of them. But this is the key result in that. And it was identified as a key result, not because I could see how it would be applied. I didn't see it at all. And even immediately after it was solved, I didn't see at all. It's sort of murky. But just on the philosophical ground, which, when I started, there was Jean Bouguin came out, and I discussed with him when he was just out. This is a very traumatic experience to talk to Jean Bouguin, because it's clear that I was not of the same caliber than he was. It's so obvious. And I had discussion with him, discussing a problem. And each time the problem involved basic object like that, Jean Bouguin would say, yes, it's fundamental. Whenever you have a simple basic object involved, you can have the belief that you will meet that at some point. And I still believe that. And of course, I believe it because that's the way it happened for me. Now, it may not happen for people who study much more complicated structure. I studied only very basic structure, and there it was true.
And this was but the price that you paid out, the $55,000, that was a spin-off of your short price?
No, that was my own money. It's much before. It's 2011. The short price was 2019. Right. Now, I didn't tell my wife that I was offering this money. I didn't want to be scolded. But that was paid for my own money. I wouldn't have told
my wife either.
No. But, okay,
But now you're at
now the show prize money, I donated the show prize money to create a mathematical prize in the areas which, not only in the areas where I worked, but in the areas which I understand enough to have a great respect for the work which is being done in these areas, which of course is, these include functional analysis, probability, and theoretical foundation of computer science and combinatorics. I have a special taste for combinatorics because many of my work have some combinatorics component in that.
Yeah. And importantly, you have to understand the proof.
No,
it to give the money.
No, the problem I give my own money, I have to understand the proof. Though the price I created, of course, it will last much longer than I will. So. And I have to say that the Abel money is going to join the same. So it will start a very significant prize. And it starts, the first year is 2032. Or before if I die.
You know, we had to get back to the books, 6 books or whatever you have written, and with one with a co-author. And that must have taken a tremendous amount of time.
Okay, I've seen a picture of Donald Knuth sitting in front of the book he wrote. There is an entire bookshelf, you know. So what are 6 books? Just a few years of work, right? And actually, you know, to my shame, I will say that the last 2 are books. The quantum field theories book and the one I revised is book. But the other one, they are huge papers. You understand the difference? They have not been reworked. No, the book with Michel Ledoux is a book because Michel Ledoux had great pedagogy, so this is a book. And the other are long papers, which means I collected the result, I unify the notation. Okay, it's much better than a collection of paper. It's like one long paper. It's homogeneous, but it has not been chewed and digested and chewed.
Because I browsed through the book with what is your co-author? Legrand? No, your co-author.
Michel Ledoux?
Exactly. The book you wrote on the probability in Lama spaces. It's very well written. I mean,
because that's thanks to Michel Ledoux. And Michel Ledoux knew how to write. Sure. That's why I wrote the book with him.
Oh well, I think that's too modest for you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think we should head towards the end. And
not yet. Not yet. No, because we have to take one more topic, and that's what you said about. Well, let me Carlson, Bernard Carlson, who got the Abel Prize in 2006. He said the following: to prove something hard, really hard, it is extremely important to be convinced of what is right and what is wrong. You could never do it by alternating between the one and the other because the conviction somehow has to be there. Do you agree with that sort of attitude?
Different mathematicians have different opinions. Maybe Carlson could afford that. But it's very dangerous to be convinced that something is true and only try to prove it's true. And then if it's not, you are dead. And I met people working a long time to prove things are true and they are not true. So my own philosophy has always been to alternate. If I don't make progress proving it's true, then I try to disprove it. But actually, it's the same. When you try to disprove it, you make new observations. And if you cannot, you see obstacles in disproving, to try to disprove it. Of course, obstacles to disprove are part of a proof. But it's important not to have prejudice. The worst things which can happen to you is prejudice. You are convinced something is true, and I was myself victim of prejudice many times. When I worked on the boundedness of Gaussian processes, there is a specific case which is much easier. In the case where the index set is what is called ultrametric. Now, ultrametric metric space means it's built of pieces which are well separated from each other. In that case, it's fairly easy. So there was an obvious approach to prove that, is to prove that in a general metric space, you can find a piece which is a subset which is ultrametric and which is in the sense appropriate for Gaussian processes as large as the original set. That's the obvious approach. Now, I knew this is obvious approach, so I didn't try it because it's so obvious everybody must have tried it and it must fail. And then after spending miserable months failing completely, I say, it would be better if I understand why this obvious approach doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? And I tried it, and it took less than 3 days to prove that it worked. And why I could do it when it has not been done before? There was a slight combinatorial obstacle. And most mathematicians cannot pass a slight combinatorial obstacle. No, this is true. This is.
I'm sure you're aware of that. Hardy, in his book Mathematician's Apology, said the following: "Mathematics is a young man's game." And he also said, "A mathematician may still be competent enough at 60, but it is useless to expect him to have original ideas." Now I compare that with what you wrote in your autobiography. Preconception, which prevents us from looking in new directions, is the worst enemy of a research mathematician. This is also one reason why big advances are often made by younger researchers. The older ones know too much. Comment.
I had Hardy's book on the desk of somebody sharing my office very early. So I read that when I was young, and I was greatly influenced by what he said. I was also greatly influenced by Professor Choquet, who one day asked me, "Talagrand, how old are you?" And I said, "Sir, I'm 29. And he said, "You hurry up, you have exactly 1 year to prove something important." That really was traumatic. And of course, I didn't invent anything myself. I'm just repeating that.
Yes.
But I could, on the other hand, I could witness, the most magic experience of a mathematician, and you get this idea in your mind and you feel that it was not there before. It's something which is a new step, and it's marvelous enough that I could identify that clearly happening to me. And during the magic period from 85 to 95, it was every 6 months, I got an idea, I saw that there's something there. And then it became more and more rare. And then it completely stopped. At least the feeling I had completely stopped. Didn't mean that I didn't have some small ideas. But then I get the message, that's the time to stop. I'm not going anywhere. That's the way I felt. But on the other hand, this thing I mentioned about Fourier series, but in fact, it was there. It's just I never dared making the right conjecture because it was too miraculous to hope that it would be true. Yeah. So it's complicated.
Right. I also would like to cite what Littlewood, a British mathematician, said: "Most of the best work starts in hopeless muddle and floundering, sustained on the smell that something is there." Does that describe something, a feeling?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Of course, at the beginning you don't see anything, and you have to either to hope or somehow feel that there is a possibility that,
or smell, as you smell it, yeah.
When hope, especially when when you know from history that things have not been looked at that way. This is great motivation, because it's easier when you are the first one. It's so much easier to discover the things. Be the first one to look at them. If it's a well-known problem, how can you do that?
Yeah, right.
So I hope we can cut this into earlier in this session, but I have one question that I wanted to ask. And that was regarding your Talagrand's inequality. And I wanted to cite Terence Tao on it, and I wanted to hear if you had some thoughts about the formulation. So he says that Talagrand's inequality implies that convex Lipschitz functions on Bernoulli variables concentrate as if they were Gaussian. Does that summarize the idea behind what Talagrand's inequality want to say?
As if they are Gaussian, it means the fluctuations are not larger than the Gaussian, and that's exactly what the inequality says.
Come in as Bernoullian, and then this Lipschitz functions come out as a Gaussian.
Yes, that's how could you improve on Terence Tao formulation? And actually, he must have liked this inequality because the proof was reproduced in his blog.
Definitely.
Okay, then I guess we near the end. But before we say thank you for the interview, we have to ask you a question about your non-mathematical interest. Do you have any special interest besides mathematics?
I'm very mediocre as anything else than mathematics, and I've entirely focused my life on mathematics.
But you did run a marathon once.
Okay, that was to compensate from having been excluded to do any sport because of my eyes. So I had to explore my own natural energy, and I discovered that if you are a normal person and spend 6 months training for a marathon, you can do it. It's a very interesting experience. I recommend it to everybody. It's part of life.
And you've traveled widely, haven't you?
That's... I have an interest, family interest, and, we have to do things together to work as a family.
And
I'm a cultural animal, I spend my life in museum. I greatly enjoy the one in Oslo.
And your wife, of course, plays the piano, and you enjoy music.
I enjoy her playing the piano. That's the...
Well, on behalf of the Norwegian Math Society and the European Math Society, and Bjørn and me, we would thank you for this most interesting interview.
I would like to thank the Norwegian people for celebrating mathematics the way they do, which is Norway is by many measures the most civilized and developed country on the planet. And the way that they put mathematics forward, as a mathematician, I'm greatly honored and thankful for that.
Nice to hear. Nice to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.